Welcome to the Threat Insights Weekly group discussion. We have a pretty short agenda today, and we have a first-time attendee. Subhash, is this the first time you've made it to this, that we've had this meeting?
Yes.
Since you've been here? Okay, welcome.
Yes.
We try and do this every week, and we alternate between an APAC-friendly and an EMEA-friendly time zone. So we'll jump right in. We have a pretty regular agenda, which you can see here. We don't have any follow-ups. Wait, I'm looking at the 12th. We don't have any follow-ups from previous discussions because I put my thing in the wrong category. Sorry, these are not demos. These are follow-ups. So I have a question around documentation. This came up in Slack from Will. And it was around the JIRA issue creation. And I see Subhash on the line, so he might be the person to help me get an answer to this question. Given that we're doing all this work for the JIRA issue creation behind a feature flag, has there been any development on the documentation so far?
Sorry, Lindsay, did you say Subhashish or did you say Savash?
I said Subhash. Sorry, that is going, you're right. You said this in the last call that your names sound similar. Maybe I need to go by last names, but Subhashish, I'm not going to try and pronounce your last name either. Subhash. And I think I pronounced both of your names wrong, so I apologize. But Subhash, given that you've been working on the front end for the JIRA issue creation up until now, have you done any work around documentation yet?
Nope. We should do that after the feature flag, I guess.
And that was sort of my question, and this is why I wanted to bring it up on this call, was to get more maybe a general overall. When we're developing something behind a feature flag, I think there's a couple of different ways that we can approach the documentation. Given that this feature flag is basically going to be off for everybody, and we're not going to provide instructions to turn it on until everything's ready, I think what you're saying, Subhash, makes the most sense to do it all at the end. We don't typically create an issue to track the updates or creation of documentation, but that's right where my brain went. So I was wondering if you had other thoughts.
If I'm not mistaken, when we switched to the new security dashboards, we did it that way. We had, we developed everything and then we created, we updated documentation accordingly. So apart from that, I don't know. I would need to check for alternatives.
I remember that. If I remember right, we actually jumped the gun a little bit on the documentation. We had the documentation out there before everything was 100% ready, and we kind of had to hope that no one complained.
Well, I've seen in our documentation that there's ways to indicate that something's behind a feature flag. But again, I think that's more if you're doing a gradual rollout and giving people the option to configure things on versus a development feature flag to turn things on once everything's ready. So it sounds like what both Jonathan and Subhash are saying, that this is what we did with standalone vulnerabilities. So it worked for us then, with the exception of maybe this misstep where we got things out a little prematurely. And does anyone have any concerns about following that same pattern with the JIRA issue creation?
No, I think that's wise to hold off, especially if it's a little bit unstable still, and we don't want to cause more issues just because it's still under development.
I think we just need to make sure that once we switch the feature flag to default on, then we need to have the documentation ready. So that's probably the only thing that we need to make sure that works.
Well, this will give Matt an opportunity to see it live before we turn it on for customers. So to learn from our experience recently with some filters, the more demo, the better. So, all right, thank you. That was that question for me. And then just an FYI, I'm depreciating and I'm archiving historical meeting notes all over the place. So your invite should always still point to the most recent. We don't have any demos unless if anyone has anything impromptu to share on the call. All right, we got two things for planning breakdown. I'm not sure, Jonathan, I think you were participating in the discussion around the issues created from vulnerabilities set to confidential by default. I'm not sure if we needed this on the list. I think it's moved on to ready for default or ready for development.
Yeah. It was a two-pointer. It's got a refinement plan out there. It's a real simple one to go through. think it's in there as a feature. I don't know if it should be a bug. I don't know. It's kind of 50-50 on that, but it's got an implementation plan, and should be ready to go.
Matt, I'll let you decide if you think that's a bug, not a feature.
Yeah, I was kind of on the fence about it too. I mean, I'm inclined not to necessarily call it a bug since we actually changed the way that it behaves. So since the functionality is different, I don't think it's a clear-cut bug. I think it's just bringing parity back to a previous behavior that we redid.
Cool. Thank you. This is another item added to the agenda that I'm not 100% sure. I mean, it's in planning breakdown. It's definitely not a feature that we're breaking down. It's a technical debt issue. I was hoping that this would be a discussion that Tiago is on, because to be honest with you, I don't have the context here. We can defer this until a APAC friendly meeting when we have Tiago on the call, unless Jonathan, if you have any insight, because this is very back-end heavy in the API support realm.
I didn't even look through it.
Okay. I don't want to ask you to do it right now. So
Yeah.
I think that'll be in the next week's planning breakdown list.
Yeah, there's a lot to read in that one, so it's not something I can just scan through real quick.
Yeah, and I'll ask Tiago to put a note out to the team to ask them to review it in advance. We did bump this from last week for the same reason. So that's all we have on our agenda for today. We do have an office hours scheduled after this from 9:30 to 10:30. I know that it's late for you, Subhash, Jonathan, and Subhashish. This is optional. It is always helpful if someone from the engineering team can join to help answer questions. Matt, I hope you're able to attend, because I know Philippe is coming.
We did puzzles last time.
We did puzzles last time. It makes it more fun, right?
Yeah.
We could puzzle now if you want.
One thing I will comment on this last thing before we get off is I was in my one-on with Tiago. I was mentioning that I just forget to look at the breakdown boards and that list in planning breakdown. Like I see it if the issue gets assigned to me, but I don't actually go out there and look. That's something that I needed to start doing.
You mean my helpful Slack reminders aren't doing the job?
I get lost in the Slack reminders. Like I'm actually, that's one of the things I'm trying to do better this year. Look at the Slack channels before the day gets started. Because, but yeah, so just I know that it's just me, Subhashish and Savas in there.
You're not the only one, Jonathan. If you have suggestions on ways to make that easier.
I think it's just making sure that we go out there and, again, these refining planning breakdown is this constant trying to figure out how to make it better, how to get us in a better groove, a better process, and making sure that we go out there to check those things out on a regular basis is important. I think I usually filter for the current milestone, so I would even have missed this since it's 13.9.
So rather than going to the board, would it make sense to go to the list in this agenda?
Yeah, probably either one. I just forget. I look at these. I'm look at these things right before the meeting. I need to look at the.
You're not the only one, and it's a lot to ask people to remember. I mean, we've got a lot of these little steps where we ask people to remember things, and those Slack notifications are easy to ignore. So, it would be easier if we were to go in and @mention in the issue. That could be, it would create a to-do for you. I'm trying to get creative and think of ways to improve on this. We're trying. If you've noticed, the lists are shorter than they used to be. So I think that's helpful too.
I will say that Slack mention did work, but I went to the wrong meeting. I went to the previous meeting to look at.
Look at how great our agenda for the staff meeting was because of that.
It was good.
Why don't we bring this up in the retro? I think it's an important it's an important issue, because I also I forget to look at this agenda days before. I usually look at it 20 minutes before. So I don't even have the time to read all the issues. So maybe we can bring this up in the retrospective.
Yeah, I will say the Slack message goes out on Monday, right?
Yeah, it goes out on Monday early morning, both for container security and threat insights.
Yeah. I think for me, like putting it on like Friday and like saying on Friday, I'm going to look at this thing is a lot better than on Monday. Cause usually on Monday, I'm like, okay, I want to get rolling and getting some work done. By Friday comes, I'm like, you know.
So to Savash's point, I'm not going to make any changes right now. Jonathan, would you mind pulling up the 13, I guess we're in 13.8, the 13.8 retro and add that as a piece of feedback on what to improve on or what didn't go well?
Sure. Yeah, I can definitely do that. I'll do that.
Thank you.
Also, Slack messages, I think they're not that reliable because by the time we see the message, maybe there are new messages being written, so they stay behind since it's kind of asynchronous.
Tip for you, Savash, you could scroll up higher.
That little wheel on your mouse, right?
No, but it's a good point. It's one way to remind people, but it doesn't need to be our only one. So
yeah,
I don't want to be a naggy, micromanagey house mom or anything like that, but I want to make sure that given the amount of things that we're asking people to remember to do on a weekly basis, that those items are very clear and present. So cool. We'll stew on that a little bit. And I think for this meeting, we're good right now, unless anyone has any other topics or questions.
I'm good.
All right. Thanks. I'll share the recording.